Last year, LEV was a dominating force in VCT and ended the year as one of the best teams in the world, but since Aspas left for MIBR, the team has truly not looked the same. It's easy to say that Aspas was carrying the team and that Demon 1 was a downgrade, but a single player leaving is never the full explanation for the complete downfall of a team. Aspas was incredible, and LEV definitely lost a generational talent that could bail them out of tough situations, but LEV also had a working team system and identity last year, whereas this year, things look all over the place with their comps, strats, and their improvised situations. In this video, we're going to explore what really happened to LEV after Aspas left, and some important reasons why the former America's Super Team has been struggling in Stage 1. I already touched upon LEV's 2024 playstyle in a previous video about Aspas, where I described LEV's attack side to be a two-pronged entering approach between Aspas and Tex, who shared the first engagement responsibilities of the team. In many setups, Aspas and Tex would be the primary risk takers for the team, and a lot of their playmaking would work with both players looking for opportunities off of each other. This sometimes meant lurks on different parts of the map where both players would take timings off the other's pressure, but it also meant situations where both players were grouped together on these slow defaults, and they worked together to fight for openings like in this clip on Abyss. LEV were sometimes criticized for playing such a slow style, but it clearly worked for them and they had an identity around it. This is exactly why their strongest maps at Champs last year were big maps like Abyss or Icebox, where they could really take advantage of this slow-played contact style by using their double controller comps with Harbor to create pockets to lurk and play contact. Watch this clip on Icebox against G2, where G2 starts with an aggressive fight into A main. LEV really take their time to work into A main, leveraging their Harbor utility to try and isolate duels. After an initial skirmish, they continue to creep up slowly, and this causes a moment of doubt for G2 as they worry about the mid flank and leave A main to check, and off this timing, Tex is able to find the fight that opens up the round. Here's another round from the same game, where they again open into A main. You can see them methodically use all their Harbor utility to work out onto site, playing to avoid aggressively forcing fights if possible. LEV really leaned into this slow play style as they had one of the longest average round times at Champs last year. An average attack round for them took nearly 96 seconds, which made them the slowest attacking team in the top 4 last year. Even if this was boring for some to watch, as we would see LEV run down the clock in many rounds, it clearly worked well for them, and it was a style that they could lean into and challenge the best teams in the world with. Here's a plot which shows whether or not LEV won a round, and how long each of these rounds took at Champs last year. The rounds that they lost are in red, and the rounds that they won are in green. You can tell from the distribution of points that LEV would more often win rounds if those rounds were dragged on longer and longer. For example, this section of the plot, well above LEV's median round time, indicates that if LEV's attack rounds dragged on super long, they would more than likely win them. You might argue that this trend seems logical for most teams, but for comparison, I'll show you PaperX below them, who were one of the fastest teams at Champs last year with a median round time of only 75 seconds. That's nearly 20 seconds faster than LEV's playstyle. You can see that it's truly the complete opposite for a team like PaperX, who relies on faster paced rounds. There's a clear delineation for PaperX, because you can clearly see PaperX wins significantly more of their rounds up until a certain point when they start to lose way more rounds that drag on too long. What this graph shows about LEV is that they truly had a good handle of their slow attack side playstyle in the past. So what started to change for them in 2025? Let's look at some more recent footage from them on Icebox, since it recently came back into the map rotation. In this match against NRG, I personally noticed a lot of rounds from LEV which felt much more forced compared to how they used to play the map. NRG presented a lot of opportunities for early fights, but instead of taking these fights methodically and using time to create better opportunities, LEV were often seen going head first into NRG's setups, and this would run them right into traps that NRG were planning. Here's a round where LEV starts with a 5-man push into A main. They're able to dodge NRG's initial attempt at a fight over pipes, but suddenly, without really waiting much time at all, LEV starts the KO ult and force themselves into the fight. KO dies instantly, and the rest of the team is roped into taking a fight against NRG, who had already made it clear that they were looking to challenge A main. This entire exchange throws away a really important round that LEV needed to win the map, and it's a completely different pace and style from what made the previous LEV roster so successful in the first place. Here's a recent pistol round from their match against MIBR, where there are literally 4 players wide swinging belt instantly as the round starts. Now compare that to how LEV played their attack side pistol on Icebox last year at Champs against EDG. The pacing difference from these 2 rounds is literally night and day. Obviously, adding 2 new players is going to change their team dynamic and team strengths, but it's really interesting when we plot the graph we looked at earlier for the 2025 LEV roster. Old LEV showed a bias towards longer attack rounds being more successful, but we actually see a similar and arguably even stronger pattern with the new LEV in 2025. This is a huge indicator that LEV are struggling with their identity, because technically speaking, their strengths are the same as last year, but for some reason, they're playing differently than before. LEV in 2025 are winning more rounds when they're dragged on longer, indicated by this lopsided shape and section at the end where there are way more wins than losses. This makes sense because they still have the same coach and IGL, but their median round time is more than 7 seconds slower than it used to be. Now, I know you're thinking that a 7-second decrease in round time is not that much, considering their median round time is still pretty high at 89 seconds, but an even more important indicator is first engagement time. When we look at all the teams at Champs in 2024, LEV was the second slowest at taking their first engagements on attack, taking 38.4 seconds before finding first blood or giving up first blood. This aligns with what I was saying earlier, with how old LEV were much more methodical and careful about their duels and played out the start of rounds much more slowly. But in stage 1 of VC Americas this year, LEV are finding their first engagement more than 7 seconds faster than they did before, taking an average of 31.1 seconds per attack round. Contextually, this is a massive change, because this would have put them as one of the fastest teams at Champs last year. LEV are now much more aggressive with their peaks than before and less careful with the fights they take, and this is contradictory to their strengths as a team, which are slow and lurky rounds. So why is this happening to begin with? Even though Rossi is definitely a faster and more aggressive player than Mazzino, Demon 1 is a great player when he takes lurky and isolated fights, so why aren't LEV choosing to play more slowly like before? You probably guessed by now that it has a lot to do with the current meta with Taeho. Implementing Taeho simply means that you have to pick up the pace, because sitting around passively with him greatly devalues his kit. This has overall made it much harder for LEV to decide between playing the slower style they're proven to be good at, or trying to adhere to the Taeho meta, which is inherently at a much faster pace than Champs was last year. You can still see that in rounds which drag on a bit longer, LEV look much more comfortable when they don't take those aggressive early peaks. Here's another round from them against NRG on Icebox, where they start with forcing B main control. NRG drops an early Killjoy ult to push LEV back out from long, so LEV are forced to play out a slower round. You can see that Demon 1 is left towards yellow since there's a pocket there from the Killjoy ult, and LEV are naturally put in a position to punish an overextension from NRG. At the same time, Demon 1 is now also set up to find isolated fights we're so used to him winning, and this happened to be one of the only rounds that LEV actually won on attack this game. Both the stats and gameplay shows that there's a pretty clear difference for LEV when they aren't rushing their fights. I've mostly talked about LEV's attack side so far, but you can also see some of the team dynamic issues come out in role inefficiencies and result in weak defensive setups as well. Like I mentioned earlier, Rossi has more aggressive tendencies than Mazzino, and I would argue that King has always had aggressive tendencies from his past experience on Duelist. This kind of leaves Calm as the main support-first personality on the team, but this spreads his duties really thin because he's often left as the player to manage the holes on the map. This, however, does not fit at all with his role on Taeho, because he's often in positions where his utility cannot find value. For example, in their defensive pistol round, LEV look for a push into B main. NRG are all towards A, so we see a triple flank work into attacker spawn, but now this is where things take a turn for the worst. For some reason, Calm is the one left to hold the exit by himself, when he's the one with rockets and stun, which are perfect for supporting the main fight. LEV could have left Demon 1 to manage this cross, as he only has a raw sheriff, or they can just complete the triple flank and make the strong side the flank. but Calm ends up being the one left to hold the cross, which denies him a lot of good opportunities to use his util. Eventually, he moves back up through mid just so he can drop his rockets, but LEV lose all the pressure they originally had on the flank, which could have really been the key to winning this retake. In the past, we would see Aspas being the one working up the flank and then being left alone to manage the weak side while the rest of his team rotated so they could find more value from their utility. You can see this round where Aspas works up A main while the rest of the team can set up early for a fight towards B. When these same rotations happen on LEV in 2025, we might see Demon 1 being the one rotating through spawn rather than other players who have better utility. In this round, Killjoy and Viper are the ones pushing through A rather than Jet. Another thing to point out this round is that even if someone like Calm is in a position to rotate, he still ends up being the one managing the holes on the map, and this puts him in a bad position to drop his rockets. If you see players cross each other back and forth too much, it's a good indication that your rotations aren't efficient. And since Calm is worried about that mid lurk and allows Demon 1 to play the main rotate, he has to max range his rockets and they pretty much become utterly useless this round. LEV may have lost Aspas, but they also lost their entire identity as a team. I made the majority of this video before the news broke out about LEV dropping Demon 1 and Rossi, but regardless of who they pick up for Stage 2, they'll need to really reassess how they want to play the game and see if their new players can align on one vision. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. Sorry for not posting for a while. I was on vacation in Japan, which was incredible, but I'm also looking a bit more seriously at VCT work since my ultimate goal is to coach and help a team compete at some point. Until anything's confirmed though, I'll be back to my schedule posting every 1 to 2 weeks, so see you guys next video and keep those suggestions coming.